Zoom. Okay, MBT Book Club, chapters, what is it, 16, no, 17, 18, and 19. First 3 chapters in section 2. So just quickly, the intention is to hold compassionate, loving space so that we can all really support each other on this journey and lift each other up. So there's no criticism or judgment here. There's only compassion and love. We'll go around and do a quick check-in and see what your overall thoughts, feelings, insights were of the material that we read. Maybe we'll just go counterclockwise. So Daniel, do you want to start?
Sure. This is, even though I'm quite analytical, reading this part for my second time was tough. Just trying to understand all his jargon and yeah, I just found it a little bit hard to understand at first, but I think I'm a slow reader, so I really had to read this very, very slowly to get a good understanding of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, a bit more challenging when it's not just a story about Tom, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. How about you, Suzanne?
Well, we've definitely started to move into the meat of the book, as it were, and I'm the same way. It's been a while since I've read this, so it's just going back and trying to get back into it, and I have to go slowly as well. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I just don't absorb it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And Dean, how about for you?
Oh, is it already on me? I thought I had Donna before.
It's in a different order on everybody's screen.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I count myself lucky that I got a little brief interlude there. First of all, I'd just like to address everybody and say thanks, guys, for letting me join. This is great. It's really a pleasure to hang out with some like-minded folks that are going over this material, especially Tom's big theory of everything. Some of it's pretty dense, and I have read through the book and just got the opportunity or found out about you guys just a little ways back, so didn't cover this material. Yeah, some of it's pretty dense, and overall don't have any particular things that come to mind on this. I'll just kind of hang back, and if something comes up that I can contribute, I'll try to say something nice.
Great, awesome, thank you. Donna?
Yeah, same thing. It's laying the foundations. So yeah, you better go slow, even if you're a fast reader, to begin to understand conceptually. And it's a change in, I had to suspend my beliefs. Mm-hmm. Like that he allowed me to do that. You know, that I could just go, okay, I'm going to hang in with time, I'm going to suspend my beliefs, and here we go.
Yeah.
So that.
Awesome. Very cool. And Sylvia?
I think for me, particularly given that as many of us do, I live in a very science and numbers driven kind of community. I think that whole notion of how important each person's context is as to how they come to material is a thing that just I kept on thinking about so much, particularly as I have a lot of discussions with scientists about some of this stuff, and the scientists are the best and the worst. You know, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people that say, but just there can't be anything else. And I'm like, well, why? Based on what evidence? That seems fundamentally unscientific to me, you know, like that sort of thing. And so, yeah, so just that idea that we each have this context that is some of our, you know, growing up and with some of our experiences and our education, and that we all are coming into this. It's like the, you know, the blind man looking at the elephant. We're all coming in with a different preconceived notion, and how, you know, and challenging it is to lift that up so that we can actually come at things objectively. And probably nobody can entirely come at these things objectively. actually. And I think that's just something I think a lot about anyway. And these chapters kind of highlight that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And then Pamela, are you?
I'm here.
Oh, she's here! Yay!
I'm here. I'm just eating my breakfast because I just got up, so I didn't want to crunch in anybody's ear. Yeah, I haven't read the book in years. It's been many years since I've read the book, and I'm listening to it on audio. And as it turns out, so far, most of what he said in these first 3 chapters are things that he says constantly, so I hear it a lot.
Right.
So I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, and I have a hard time paying attention, unfortunately, because it's like I've heard all of this so much. So, yeah, I'm having a different reaction than everybody else's. It's like, I mean, particularly the belief trap and the reality. And even when you're living day to day, you have these kind of aha moments about things that are in the book, like how different everybody's reality is. And the last time Tom and I flew on a plane, I had a little bit of one because I may have told you the story, but I couldn't get my little screen in front of me to work. And I wanted to see the flight path that we were on. And Tom, of course, sitting next to me, and he's taller than me, and he's on an aisle seat, and he says, well, just look at the one up in the front, because they had a bigger one up in the front. But, I can't even see but the very, very tippy top of that one. So it's like, even when you think you're sitting right next to someone and you're seeing the same thing, your realities are very different.
That's a great
It's a great analogy.
That is a good one.
Pamela, we missed you last week.
On mute.
Yeah,
I was having a good time.
Or not.
Yes, you were missed.
Yes, you were. It's good to have you back. Good to be back here. So for me, it was, I loved it all. When I got to the last chapter that I was just reading this morning, chapter 19 about beliefs and belief trap, kind of was thinking maybe we would take a whole session on this because it's really, really important. And Tom reiterates that throughout the chapter like 10 times, how, don't just glaze through this. You need to understand this. And it's so hard for you to understand it, but you have to get it. This is kind of step one is uncovering those beliefs that most of us don't even see as beliefs because they're us. We see the world that way. So I was thinking maybe today what we could do is go through the material really slowly. And I kind of had the thought that maybe we'll only get through chapter 17 and 18 today. And then next week we'll go through and we'll spend a whole week processing and looking at chapter 19 and then discussing it next week. So
I like that idea.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
19 is huge, very important.
Okay. Awesome. So let's jump into the material. Does anybody have anything on the first page of chapter 17?
Yes, for me, just that notion of we have this double dose of ignorance in the second paragraph, almost near the end, where we have our cultural beliefs and we don't have infinite scientific understanding. And I just think that's I always carry that with me, particularly again when I'm talking to scientists, and I always say, well, at one stage people were like burned for saying the earth was round. Like, why do they think that we know everything now? I find it so interesting. But anyway, so that's kind of the sentence that popped out for me.
Yeah, that's such a good example that people were burned for saying the earth is round. And now when we say the earth, it's a virtual reality, oftentimes people laugh. They're like, oh, sure, if it's a virtual reality, yeah, okay, like the Matrix, right? And yeah, people can't even fathom that idea. But it's the same thing when they were saying the earth is round. Right?
Yeah. Or even
I want you to know that for me, this whole past week, I'd be taking the dogs for a walk, and I kept thinking about this virtual reality, and I go, then where am I? I'm outside the system, and I'm in my avatar, and I just I felt like a triple dose of ignorance. You know, I was like, where am I? I didn't know. Yeah, it said what may be perceived by an individual to be mystical is relative to their understanding, knowledge, and ignorance. Now, you don't know what you don't know. So that was the theme for me. I go, I'm only on page 1. How am I going to get through this? I'm stuck on 1. I'm walking around going, then where are we? Anyways, it was an existential crisis.
That's what brought us all here together.
Yeah. What? Has anybody else thought that? Like,
oh, totally.
Yes, but I try not to spend too much time in it because I'll just drive myself crazy. It's like I don't know. That's mystical for me. So I just
yeah, it hurt my
brain. For some reason, when Sylvia was talking about how the Earth is round, it just popped into my head about the people now who believe in the flat Earth theory, and it's just even in our current. Well, in Western society, where we have supposedly all this Western knowledge and scientific knowledge, that there's still people who are like, no, I still don't even believe that. And, the Earth is flat, and here's why. And it's just this whole, we're all in so many different beliefs that it's just astounding. And I know I have a lot of them, but there's it's like you have a blind spot to your own. You can see everybody, like he talks about. You can see everybody else's, but you're just sort of blind to yours.
Yeah, you're so used to wearing it or existing in it that it just becomes part of your reality. So it's not there. Like wearing your glasses and wondering where you left them, and they're still on your face.
Yeah.
Phrase that Tom, is it like open skepticism, or what does he always say?
Oh yeah,
be an open skeptic.
Yeah.
Open-minded skepticism.
Okay, open, but that's the bit even for all of us, I think, and the place that I try and sit in is that open-mindedness, which kind of feels, for me, the way I articulate it for myself, like a lack of attachment to like something that I believe or I'm thinking. Like I try not to get too attached to it. So it can be there, but it feels more like a working hypothesis rather than a deeply held thing. And if you can kind of, it's funny because you also want clear focus. And so that's where I struggle, is all these balances of these what seem like contradictions. So I want clear focus and intent, but I also want this like not attachment, openness. And those two sometimes feel like they conflict, but if you can sort of get into a space where you're like, those don't conflict, if you don't get too logical about it, it can feel okay. But if you try and get really super logical about it, then I guess that's your analytical mind coming in.
Well, and it seems like that's far easier to do about ideas when it comes to you personally. So when it comes to me, I find it very hard to be an open-minded skeptic about my qualities because, I have these beliefs about how I am, I'm open-minded and I'm skeptical until challenged with maybe some of my own behaviors or thoughts. And then I have to say, well, maybe not as much as I think. It's just easier to think that, you read a book and these are ideas. And so it's easier sometimes for me to be open-minded and skeptical about the ideas, but how I am is a bit harder to do. We all like to think of ourselves as very advanced, as it were. At least to some degree. And so that's where I really
think that's very typical. It's easy to, like you say, see other people's and look at what's going on around you and say, yeah, but I'm not like that, or that doesn't apply to me. But really analyzing what you really are like, that's more difficult.
Yeah.
It's easy to judge other people than themselves, right?
And it's kind of can be a slippery slope too, in that oftentimes you can have this grandiose idea of who you are and you've got it figured out, you're very evolved. And then if you get real and you start looking at yourself and you're like, actually, I have a lot of insecurities. You know, I have a fear of being inadequate. I have a fear of rejection, a fear of abandonment. And then when you get real with yourself, you're like, oh my God, I'm a piece of shit when I look at it.
Right.
And then you don't want to go down there though, because like Tom says, don't think of yourself as this like insignificant little piece. See yourself as part of the LCS, and you have a big capability, a big capacity to grow and evolve into your potential. So I find it is a slippery slope, because when I start looking at all my fears, I can get really down on myself. But I have to keep reminding myself that, no, okay, that's good. I know what my fears are, and now I can do the work to get there, because I am this being who has a lot of potential. I just have to keep reminding myself. So, yeah.
Right. And we're all allowed to grow and become more, and we're not a noun, we're a verb, right?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
It's a comma, not a period at the end of the sentence.
Yeah, there you go. Nice. I like that. That's great. Yeah. And when we micro scrutinize ourselves and get so focused on one particular aspect and, maybe a mistake we made, can overdo it, overthink it.
Yeah.
I like Suzanne's mantra. I'm taking it on myself. And when you say a lot of things don't really matter because I'm doing the best I can, I'm evolving, and it could be that I'm preparing myself for my next incarnation.
There you go. Yeah, it's all practice. It's a practice.
It's practice. It's practice. When I get crazy, when I get too crazy, I go, it's practice.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
Yeah. And Donna, like you were saying earlier about the existential crisis, I find that with this material, learning about virtual reality and consciousness, often if I'm going about my daily routine, I'll have that in my intellect, kind of the big picture in my intellect, definitely not at the being level, but at least in my intellect. And then I'll start shifting my perspective in how I'm viewing this physical reality at the intellectual level only, but it's a start. So what that looks like for me is my thoughts will be like, wow, that's so interesting that all these people here, say I'm in the mall, all these people are simply avatars. And this is a data stream that's going into my IUOC, or my individuated unit of consciousness. It's a data stream, and I'm interpreting it to be this mall with all these physical people. Wow, that's such a neat concept. And I'll play with that. Instead of just seeing things as I always see them, I'll start at least thinking about them differently, hoping that through this repetition, it'll eventually sink into my being level. And I'll actually know it differently.
Well, when you start thinking of yourself as you're somewhere else, for me, for my brain, it's like, okay, so there's a part of me somewhere else, and this part is interacting with this reality. It's like you said, Vanessa, it really makes me step back. It's made me step back and start realizing or think differently. I'm thinking differently, and I think it's like when you have, you're learning a different golf swing. You used to have this swing and you could hit the ball, and your teacher's teaching you another swing. In the meantime, you can't hit the ball anymore. You're just like, what am I doing?
Right.
That's where I feel like where I'm at. Yeah, all those old beliefs, that's where I was. And I know I'm heading over here, but this week with these chapters, I'm trying out a new a golf swing in my head. I'm trying out this thinking. It's different.
Yeah, that's a cool analogy. Mm-hmm. When I hear when I hear you say, Donna, if I think of myself in a different place,
Yeah.
I don't really see it like that I'm in a different place. It's so hard to put into words, right? Because we aren't physical. Like this is physicality, time and space. They're all just computations, and that's how we understand it. But it's not like like we interpret it to be that way because this is what we experience, but it's hard to put into words. Like it's like a feeling. It's like I'm not in a different place. It's just like my feeling of who I am is who I am, and it's not this avatar. It's beyond this avatar. Yeah.
Yeah, my golf swing's messed up right now.
You have some cognitive dissonance happening there.
Serious cognitive dissonance, Dean.
Well, what I see is you're challenging your current beliefs by having learned this golf swing, so you can figure out how to create a different belief.
Yeah.
Or how to incorporate this new golf swing to incorporate it with your current beliefs.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think the other part of it, having just gone through this like deeply human physical experience that I went through, is that also, I mean, the reason we've incarnated into this, physical seeming reality is because there's purpose to the learning that we have to do here. So sometimes by, focusing out there, it also then you're not, it's a lack of integration because none of us are Tom. There's like we experience these things in different modes. So in our deeply human mode, there's also that real element of being like, okay, I've been handed an experience packet to learn from as a human and within human form. And so, what quality of being can I bring to this experience that will help me go to the next level, not 10 levels up necessarily, but literally like a kid that's, going from picture books to chapter books, or whatever. Like, how am I going to get to that next level by expressing the quality of my being in this very human experience? And so in some ways, we do all this meditation and we go out and we're in consciousness, but then there's also the quality of being deeply within our humanity and learning whatever lessons we've been given. And those probably, as I certainly feel like two different things to me. I know that if I were more evolved, I'd be integrating them, but at the moment it still feels like different modes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. Yeah, definitely. And sometimes it can be, I mean, Campbell, your husband's great, but sometimes it can be a little bit like, oh my God, he's so evolved and I can't even teach my kid manners, like, it's a little bit, but not to compare ourselves to where he's at. And like you said, Sylvia, like the next level for me, and that's all I need to get to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to bring it back to the book because we're only on the first page. Second page. Anybody have anything there?
I told you at the beginning I'm suspending my belief, but I had to understand what that is. And in 116, the first indented paragraph, belief is a conclusion based on a mystical premise. And so I started writing down, I like my Post-it notes. So I started writing down as I came across them, I believe that? Oh, and maybe that's why I'm in an existential crisis, because I'm starting to get like 400 belief Post-it notes now.
Last week.
Right. Starting to feel a little cumbersome, perhaps.
Yeah. So I'm going to be quiet now because apparently y'all know I'm having a crisis.
That was the same.
No, but it's a good point. It's a good point, Donna. It's so easy to have these beliefs and to get to a point in your life where you can start questioning everything and saying, wait a minute, is that just a belief that I have?
Yes.
You'd easily have 400 of them. Everybody would have 400 of them. I've probably told this story before. I had the most trouble raising Christopher. I don't know how many of you met him at the Immersive, but he wanted to know, of course, everything. And I had, at the time, I didn't have my PhD. I had a bachelor's degree, maybe, master's or bachelor's in physics or in systems engineering. And he's asking me, well, Mom, why do you have to get out of the water when the lightning strikes? Well, what somehow I learned when I was a kid, I don't know if somebody told me that or where I made it up, I got the idea that lightning attracts water. I mean, water attracts lightning. So before I said that to him, I thought about it and I said, ooh, that doesn't make any sense at all. I better think about this before I answer him. But it's interesting, all the little things that we have that are beliefs that we got from somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Not even sure where we picked some of them up. They're buried so deep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and our ego doesn't like to admit that maybe we don't know.
Yeah, and that it's a belief. We don't like the idea that, what do you mean it's a belief? It's reality. It's real.
Touch it.
Am I pulling you all into my existential crisis? Because I really, it's not my intent to go all in. But yeah, it's like every time it seems like I said something, I'd go, oh, that's just a belief. Where did I get that from? And then I post a note. Go find out where I got that belief from.
Well, I think that, back to Pamela's story though, kids are great for sort of challenging some of your beliefs. I have grandkids who are, one of them is very literal, and he I'll say, well, you have to do this, and it's why, and then I have to stop and think, well, I don't know, that's just what I've always said. That's my belief. You have to do this action, and now I'm being challenged with but why? Well, I don't know. Let me get back to you on that. So sometimes I really have to stop and think, even some of these little things, what is the why to why you have to do these certain things? And if I can't come up with a good reason, then I have to maybe change my expectation around that. But they're really good for just pointing out to you where maybe your thinking is a bit like there's no reason for what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Susan, when you're talking about that, I remember my kids when they were quite younger, they would ask a question. I would explain to them why. Then they would ask why to that explanation.
Yeah.
Explain that, and they would go why to that explanation, because they were around and around. And you kind of get frustrated at it because it's challenging you to see if you need the knowledge or not, or how the information.
Right. And sometimes I have a very good reason why, and then it's like, okay, I understand that. It's easier for me to comply with that now. But if I can't come up with that basic reason of why it's a good thing to do that, then I've lost them. So they are very good for pointing out perhaps some flaws in your belief system.
And maybe I'm just not as patient as you guys. I don't know. I like to think I'm trying to be like Socrates, but if my kids do that, I'll say, why do you think? Why do you? But really, I feel like I'm coming from a place of encouraging them to start thinking for themselves, to finding their own answers. And I'll always remind them, because don't just believe what other people tell you. Even your teachers, if they have something that doesn't fit with you, ask why, and ask yourself why. Get other information, because not everybody has one answer.
You're getting them to taste the pudding.
Yes.
Well,
But that's very good. That's good, Vanessa, because you're having them think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
But
not just listen to what other people say, but for them to come up with their own conclusions.
Yeah, you can run out of patience, and sometimes the response is, well, why not? Just why? Which is kind of a version of, you tell me why not.
The other thing that I've found it's been useful for is as our kids get sucked into a society which teaches them lots of things that are not, that are potentially barriers to their growth, is the whys. You can also use it and say, well, the reason is because your teacher's being unwise. But you're going to be around a lot of unwise people, and now you have to decide how you're going to approach this unwise person. This is an unwise demand, but this person has power over you, and they have influence over this, and you have 3 or 4 options. I found that a lot of the whys have been helpful to just point out the cultural beliefs, because it's good for them to see that, yep, we live in an unwise society, and you have a personal choice. And sometimes you're going to be like, you know what, this is a society I live in, and I'm just going to play by the rules. And sometimes you're going to decide to, be independent and buck the system. And different kids will take different choices based on who they are and how comfortable they are. But I think it's really I've found it really useful to do a lot of, like my kids are going through the college process right now. Boy, there's a lot of lack of wisdom, as anybody of us that have been through that before. There's so much crazy cultural pressures. And just say to them, yep, these pressures are real, and they're also completely not real. And, this is the way you need to figure out how you're going to process these unreal demands or whatever.
Yeah, and if you can push back and know when to push back and to maybe initiate some change and try to get a little bit of a ripple there and, get some others to push back and maybe change a few things in that system, whatever it may be, if it's that deeply flawed.
Yeah. And use the data that you get from whatever you choose to do, whether it's comply or not comply, whatever you do, use the data in the responses you get to help inform you. Like maybe you shouldn't have pushed in that circumstance, or maybe you should have, and maybe you made the wrong decision. But that's data for the kid, because they're like, wow, well now you know what happens when you buck the system. Like, did that feel good? Did that work? Was it successful? What did you do? When did you not? Blah, 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 blah.
There are times when you buck the system, though, your marks don't show. Your marks suffer from that, so then you kind of forced to go with the status quo, right?
Sure, yeah, get tied to a post and whipped half to death, worst case scenario, right?
Wow.
Or not.
So society sort of forces you to stick with what everyone else is doing. But I like being a rebel, like challenging it, but,
What's interesting as a college professor is that I find the opposite in the students these days, in that I try telling them, okay, what do you think about this? And they want to know what answer I'm looking for. And I say, no, I'm not going to play that game. The game we're going to play today is what you actually think about this. That means you actually have to give your opinion. If you don't have an opinion, maybe you should read the book, because they don't. So I said, read the book and come back and let's hold off on this discussion. So I'm going to put it on the board what the question is, or the page number is, but you have to come thinking. So by the end of the semester, you will be discussing your thoughts on this, and including back to the book. What really intrigued me was not just the culture and not just the personal, but the data, the facts, Sylvia, like you were saying. What is the data? So the facts that were being given, like in science, where you have somebody makes a statement, and like he's saying, science becomes truth, or at least the sole judge of truth, and is given the job of defining reality. And then you have scientists, like you said, Sylvia, that are unscientific. They're not scientific in their thinking, and to call them on it. This brought my brain to a halt, in the sense of, I was looking at, well, who said that? And so this was my research week. And when something was said, I would go look for the data. Where did that come from? And I got a book from the library that I can't wait to read, but it says, "The Lies Our History Teachers Told Us." Now, it doesn't mean it's scientific, but I mean, again, it's looking at what is even being said to you. And you think, I think it was Vanessa or Sylvia, you were talking about how, what people are saying to you. And you just have to kind of stop and go, well, that's just a belief. Where did that come from? Is that a theory? Is that the best we know? Because we're going to be talking this. We're going to be saying things, well, it's just a virtual reality. And people are going to challenge us on that. And they say, well, what does that mean? This is a virtual reality. And so is it science? Is it truth? Is it, and Tom's really good on that, because he says, I'm not the sole judge of truth. I'm going to say this, but it's your experience of it. And it goes back to how we all view reality, even if from a different seat on the airplane. Mm-hmm. It's just looking at cultural, personal, scientific data. What's being said to us, do you believe that? do I have an opinion on that? Do I believe what I'm saying? So again, everything I'm going to say today is from my turned inside out cup of reality.
Well, Donna, you're right where you're supposed to be. On page 117, he says, because this goes beyond traditional belief systems to introduce an entirely new understanding of reality, much of the trilogy is spent broadening your perspective. So it's kind of, by broadening your perspective, it's turning your current worldview upside down.
Yes, it is.
Sure.
Great. I love it. Yeah. I mean, to the point of where I'm walking down the street and I'm going, where am I?
Mhm.
My dog wants to know where we are, but
You're learning a new golf swing, Donna.
my walk takes me by the golf course, so maybe apropos.
And on that same page, the second chapter, the last line, we looked at this last time, but he says, you will never be able to see the big picture as long as you focus on individual, politically correct pixels.
Yeah.
And when I hear that, that reminds me to come from a place of compassion. In hearing and discussing this big topic with people that I interact with, or in anything that when I come across people, when I'm engaging with people, when I'm interacting with people, because oftentimes we want to be like, you're so wrong and I'm so right. And that's basically that's focusing on the little details. It's getting caught up over the small stuff that really doesn't matter. And so instead of doing that, to have compassion for people, for how they choose to view reality and understand reality, because they're not necessarily wrong just because they have a religious way of viewing the world. It doesn't mean that they're wrong and that we're right. It's just that we have different metaphors for interpreting this reality that we're experiencing. Nobody's right or wrong. Right? We're all experiencing. What about the next page? Anybody have anything from 118?
So the thing that I underlined for myself was that the beginning of the last chapter, this is a difficult pill for many, especially scientists, to swallow. The concept that there may be a natural practical limit to the extent of our knowledge, a limit beyond which our perception can't penetrate, is based on the notion we are only a very small part of a much greater reality. And that notion that, you know, even Tom, like, we can't comprehend beyond what we have the ability to comprehend. And it doesn't mean that there isn't more beyond that, but that in our current understanding of rule sets and our personal experiences and blah, 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 that there's a natural limit to how much, and much of what we, even if we interact with the larger consciousness system, a lot of what we may be understanding may be metaphors that are fed to us so that we can absorb something. I think that's a bit that's quite comforting to me. Like, okay, good. I don't have to understand everything. I can only understand that which I'm capable of understanding.
Right, and I think on the next page where it says we can't be aware of what's beyond our awareness, however, we can be open to learning new things and in the process expand the scope of our awareness. So we're never going to get to knowing completely everything, but we can know more than we know now. And that's sort of what the journey that we're on is, to expand our awareness and learn new things.
You know, Suzanne, I highlighted that exact same part of the book. And I know that Tom said we have a rule set, a defined 3D rule set. We can't jump 20. So I was trying to find out what is there's something in science called the just noticeable difference. And that is if you're quiet and still and you are doing a hearing test, there's something that's called what's the threshold, the first noticeable difference from stillness to a sound. So even if we can't jump 20 feet, we have a certain hearing range, sight range, I was trying to think about that. Like, okay, maybe I won't push that physical limits, even though I'd like to jump. So I'm 5'6". I played basketball. I was trying to, so I've always been, it's 10 feet. I'm 5'6". It's a lot of ground. So I tried to do that. I tried to jump that high and realized maybe that's what I should be pushing, the physical boundaries. But maybe the awareness, maybe I can push the awareness boundaries. Maybe I can learn 5 languages. Can I do that? So I started learning different languages. So I'm trying to learn 5 languages.
Nice.
So I mean, can I do that? Can I push? Be open to learning new things. Can I study awareness and can I study consciousness? So now I know 2 new frequencies that I didn't know by studying. So I left the physical boundaries and I'm into the consciousness arena. And so I picked up a book on brain waves, and now there's 2 new brain waves that they've discovered, lambda and epsilon. And I go, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, so can I now put my brain in epsilon? Can I put my brain in lambda? I wasn't aware that there were these brain frequencies, and now I'm aware of it. Now I'm trying to meditate into those brain frequencies. So instead of being limited physically, I'm gonna push the boundaries of awareness and consciousness.
Nice.
I don't know if you knew epsilon and
I've never heard of this. Theta, beta, theta. It's like
theta, then below that is delta.
Yeah.
Delta's really slow wave, 0.5.
Way down.
Real slow wave. Below that is epsilon. We're just not being able to study epsilon. And it's really kind of freaky. I love it.
So that occurs probably only in deepest sleep then?
No, you can be aware.
Okay.
Be in delta and be aware. And Bob Monroe taught that, body asleep, mind awake.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So that I'm pushing the physical. So the physical delta, I was in the belief that I would need to be asleep during delta. I don't believe that anymore.
So it's interesting. It sounds like a strategy to help you evolve your consciousness.
Okay. I could have just said that. I'm finding new strategies to develop my consciousness.
I love that. And just over on page 120 at the very top there, the chapter, because this relates to that, where he says in the second sentence, we are generally somewhat smarter than bacteria and theoretically limited only by the capacity of our minds. Unfortunately, we are limited by much more. So beliefs, pseudo-knowledge, preconceived notions, attitudes, fears, desires, needs, and cultural biases. So all of this is limiting our capacity, our ability to evolve our consciousness, right? And so there's so many different strategies. And Donna, you have a strategy by training brainwaves. And I'm curious to see, like, what are your strategies for identifying some of these things that are limiting us? So there's a whole list of things that limit us, right? I think one of the common ones, obviously, is fears. And then desires and needs. I hear a lot about, well, desires and needs, and some people say, well, we're humans and we have these desires and these needs and they're natural, so we should continue pursuing them. I'm curious to hear what you guys think of that. Are there healthy desires? Are there healthy needs? Or should we really do our best to not pursue desires and needs?
Well, I mean, there's some very basic ones. Certainly the need to eat is that's a need. I think many of what we think are needs are not truly needs. But it's, one of the things I was thinking is, and I think I don't remember if it's later on in the book or I heard it somewhere else, but it's not really that you need to, I think it was applied to meditation. You don't need to learn how to meditate. You need to learn how to let go of whatever else is in your way. Yeah. So that's how you can and then you'll be where you want to be. It's letting go of all the things that we're holding on to. And it kind of relates back to these, what are all these things that these fears, the desires, the needs, all those things that you're holding on to in your head. And how do you just let go of all of that to get to where you want to be? It's not learning how to get to where you want to be. It's learning how to let go of what you're holding on to.
I think one of the desires and needs are fair-based, and it's more of a status, right? If I have this, then people are going to look at me and say, "You're good," right? But do we need to be good based on other people's perceptions of us? I don't think so.
So Vanessa, your question reminds me of something. One of the very first discussions, and this would be an interesting experiment to go through, that Tom and I had when we used to have philosophical discussions before we were a couple. That's what we did. Instead of most people might do other things, we had philosophical discussions. And one of the things that we were playing with was, what if you lived in an environment where there were no fears, desires, needs? What would it be like?
Yeah.
Could there be such an environment? And then what would it be like? So you kind of put yourself there and say, yeah, but what about this and what about that? And we went back and forth. It was a very fun process to go through of looking at, what would a world be like if you didn't have those? And it's interesting because a lot of those, again, are based on our culture. When you get outside of our culture, people's desires and needs are very different. When I was working, I had the opportunity to go to Kwajalein. It's an island in the Pacific where the DOD has a bunch of sensors so they can sense things that are happening, rocket launches or other kinds of things. Well, then the people on that island interfaced with the Marshallese, which were on another island or set of islands. But anyway, they came over to Kwajalein, and they would often do domestic things for them, clean or do whatever. And they had their own culture. And one lady got a new refrigerator, and she gave her old refrigerator to her lady who came to clean for her. And so a week or two later, she said, well, how do you like that refrigerator? How's it working for you? Because most people on the Marshallese Islands did not have refrigerators. And she said, well, I think it's doing pretty well, but I don't have it anymore. My cousin took it. And she goes, what? Your cousin took it? And she said, well, she has a small baby, and I guess she had a bigger need for it than I did, so she took it. And it was like, okay, there was not any like, oh, she took my refrigerator. It was like, I didn't have one, then I did have one, but I probably didn't need it as much as she did. And that was their culture. And I thought that was very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I imagine that's what it would be like, an existence where we didn't have these desires or needs or wants. We would be about others, because I wouldn't be thinking about what I need and what I want. I would be thinking,
Right.
how can I help this society? How can we all grow and work together? Yeah.
And that was it. It's like, I guess she needs it more than I do, and that's okay. Whatever.
It'd be good to have a Zoom session on that and just help us create a great awareness of that subject.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thinking of the whole, thinking of the group instead of just yourself, expanding the idea of I to encompass other.
All. Yeah. Everybody.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting because usually you would think someone who is a mass murderer or somebody who's done all these awful things is an awful person. Well, then if you stop and think, wait a minute, they're part of me. We're all part of the same consciousness. Then all of a sudden you have a different perspective about how to deal with that person even. It's more like, well, you kind of like to help that person grow rather than, kill them or do something else violent to them that makes matters worse.
Yeah, it's definitely a bad call to torture them or do bad things to them. How's that going to help anything? Stick them in a box and let them be solitary for years and years and just create this entity that's completely filled with madness or whatever. It doesn't help anything. How is that just,
What would it be like if we lived in a world where when things like that happen, instead of punishment, we were thinking, oh, that's too bad. What could we do to help that person grow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
that person needs some help.
Right. And that's why I love
Nothing.
working with Indigenous, because that's what they're all about. They do see that they're connected, that it's just one
Yeah.
they're part of one bigger family. And so if somebody does something that they don't understand, what they do is they have a sharing circle. Hey, let's talk about it. Let's help understand that. We want to actually see where you're coming from, so we can figure out a solution together and do this together. It's never about us against them, right? They're more of a collective, united in compassion for each other.
Isn't that interesting that the Indigenous people are like that? And see, that would have been the same thing with this Marshallese group. They were Indigenous people to those islands, and that they were more that way than we, who are supposedly more evolved and, you know, more modern at least. And we're all about I instead of the collective.
Mhm.
Yeah, if we could take some of that and bring it over to us or the United States of America or the bigger places and expand that and get everybody to get on board with that just a little bit. Maybe start with holding the door for other people, pleases and thank yous. Yeah, we jump ahead substantially.
That means we're challenging the belief systems, all right?
Yeah. And it's starting, and you see it. And there are people who are this way. I mean, your husband is one of them. But also, you know, everyday regular folks like bus drivers, there's people that you'll meet. If you have the eye to see them, there are amazing heroes that walk among us every day. And it's super inspiring to see that. And you'll notice them because they never talk about all the good things they're doing. But once you spend some time, you start to connect with them and you ask them the right questions, you start learning all these incredible things about them that is just, it's so inspiring to see. If we take the time to really connect and get to know people, instead of making all about me and what I need to do and rushing through my day, get to know the person standing in line to you at the office, at the doctor's office, or whatever it might be. And you meet some incredible people.
And have the eyes to see them.
Yeah.
Looking for it. Be aware.
I find these people more introverted than extroverted.
What's that?
I find these people who are helping and not having to say anything or brag about it, I find them more introverted than extroverted. I'm not sure.
That's an interesting observation. I would have to study that because.
Is that a belief, Daniel?
Yeah.
No, that's an observation.
And it may vary from circle to circle, from place to place. It may be something that exists more in one spot than another.
Okay, guys, I'm going to bring it back. On 121, do you have anything from 121?
The purpose of this work is to offer an expanded view of reality and of your relationship to that reality that is useful and helpful to a direct and practical way. And he, in his history, all the chapters we had just read, it really comes down to something practical. It's not just not doing this for the sake of the experiment, but that you're taking it and you're having a relationship with it. What we just were talking about. What's your relationship to your reality? What choices do you make that's useful and helpful? It says useful and helpful to you in a direct and practical way. And I think you have to be selfish in order to be selfless. You have to work on yourself and your awareness and your humanity to be able to pay for a cup of coffee. Maybe someone came in and they looked like they're having and not just a policeman. Someone's coming in and having a bad day, and you're in line and you pay for their coffee or something. It's just really scalability. So I can do this in my everyday life. I'm in my life here, and I can make choices every single day to make this reality a better place. And then the next person, the next person, the next person. It becomes a scalability. Maybe we'll have meditators. Maybe we'll have, it starts with a charity I just was reading about. It's called Charity Water. It's not Matt Damon's water, but just a guy that saw something and just wanted to start on a small level. Now it's really a huge charity organization now. So I think that's what we can do, is we can expand our view, have a relationship to this reality that's useful to me in a direct and practical way for others.
Yeah.
Preach the gospel, speak if you have to,
Right.
meaning, people look at your actions. How do you behave? How do you act? How do you react? And then they're watching. And I think there was a commercial about that one time where someone saw someone, give money to a homeless man, and that person that saw that went somewhere and did a kind act, and someone else saw that kind act, and they went and did a kind act. So that's what this whole book, this whole journey with Tom, to me, is expanding my reality in a useful way, a practical way, a direct way in my life. I'm not going to wait for big organizations or big groups. I'm just going to, I can do. I like that.
Yeah. And there is things that we can do, and when you do them, the reaction you might get is great, and you make an impression, and perhaps hopefully it catches on. Somebody else does the same thing. I bought a gentleman a Subway sandwich a couple days ago. He was fishing around for change. Obvious that he's retired, doesn't have a lot of money, and I got a stack of 20s in my wallet or whatever. It's not a big deal, And I said, oh, cool, here's something I can do. And so I bought his sandwich, and there was about 6 people in line. And everybody kind of saw what was going on because they're all waiting. Everybody's in a hurry. They're in a rush. And, I bought the guy a sandwich, and he was real surprised and shook my hand, went on his way. And there were some smiles and some comments in the line because you just don't ever see that. So I could tell, like, oh, cool. Everybody else kind of dug it, and that was a nice moment and a way to help, a way to just do those things that you can affect the reality and, within our circle. So hopefully some of those people went and maybe do the same thing.
Absolutely, yeah, the ripple effect.
Yeah, and then
Pay it forward.
We sharing refrigerators, right?
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I was at Starbucks, and I bought my drink, and I said, you know what, I'll pay for the person behind me's drink.
Right,
and they thought it was so cool that they did it to the person behind him, and it went, I think, 5 or 6 levels deep, right?
nice.
And that's really cool. That was really neat to see.
Yeah, I know. I remember I was in the car with my mom, and we were, I don't know, paying for Tim Hortons coffee. And I'm like, oh, and I call the cashier and pay for the people behind us. And mom's like, wait, why are you doing that? And I'm like, that's a nice thing to do. And then the next time we go through the drive-thru, my mom's like, pay for the people behind us. Here, I'll pay for them.
What I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, anything else from chapter 17 before we move on to 18?
Let's see. I've got feel in the second paragraph. Feel your way through it with your intuition as well as think your way through it.
Yeah.
And that spoke to me. I thought that was a good reminder to use, both aspects of myself, the intuitive part and the feeling part, to deal with a problem as well as the analytical side, which is something that something that they teach at the Monroe Institute, and they had different exercises that we were doing. And I found that to be, good stuff, a helpful reminder to try to use both aspects of my being to, work through a problem.
I think on that one, the thing that I for myself need to be careful as I think about that is that feeling is a very tricky word, and I don't mean to pick on Tom's word choice, but he does say feel through with your intuition, because you can feel with your fear, you can feel with desire, you can feel with neediness. There's a lot of, so feeling is very tricky. So I just want to highlight that, you know, the sentence is longer than that, and you need to make sure that as you're feeling your way, you're using your intuition, because often, particularly with, you know, the feelings of fear and ego, those two can be pretty profound. And if we start saying, oh, I'm going to trust my gut, well, your gut often is like clenched in fear. So it's super, I just think, you know, I feel like I've been doing that for 10 years, trying to figure out, okay, is that feeling from fear and lack of wisdom, or is that feeling from intuition? So I don't love the word feeling because it's too imprecise and it can lend you down the wrong path. And so as long as we're doing that with wisdom and clarity and connection, then I totally agree. You don't want to just be in your intellectual mind. You want to be in wisdom. But the word feeling can just be tricky within that. I just want to.
Well, I think you need to clear all of your channels and everything, and any emotion that you already have stuck in you is energy, perhaps, if you want to think of it that way, that's stuck within your being, and clear that out. And then feel, once you're clear like a pane of glass, where you don't have any clenched gut or fear. Because if you're trying to feel anything that way, well, you're getting, you know, you're running it through your filter. You've already got something stuck in the way. Your window is hazy.
Yep.
Yeah. When I looked at feeling, I associate with from the heart as your true self, feeling from your true self. And I am very analytical, and less so now because of Mom's teaching, but I would take forever to analyze things. It would take so long for me to make a decision. But now if I was asked, if I have trouble making decisions, I said, what do you feel is the right thing to do? And I would just go with that. And 99% of the time, it's the right thing to do. So now at times, I don't even think too much about it. I just say, what I feel is the right thing to do, and I just do it. And it saves so much time for me.
That's great. That's great.
So when I'm learning the Native American flute, so left brain, analytical brain is looking at the musical notes, and at the end of every session, I go somewhere where no one in the house can hear me and just play from my heart, just play out of that to evolve that intuitive part of me, like just get in the music, just do that.
That's awesome.
Left and right brain. I always try to, for every left brain I do, I'm trying to do something right brained.
You should share that with us, that music. Play some of that for us.
Put her on this.
My food's in the other room. But yeah, it's like, just try to just let it come through. And I'm surprised. I go, oh, I did a finger method that I hadn't learned yet. And I'm going, as I'm playing, I'm going, holy cow, who's doing that? Maybe my other self. It's somewhere else.
Thank you for that, Donna. That's so helpful to me, because my younger son has been saying, and we've noticed this, that he's starting to go to the piano and let his intuition guide him. It's not the language he uses. And I wasn't really, I mean, I was appreciating that he wants to be at the piano and he's doing this, but you've just brought it into my awareness that actually there's something else going on there, which is, you know, awesome. So thank you for that. I needed to hear that. That's really cool.
Thank you. You needed to hear my voice, not my music.
Well, I do need to hear
It's a really good point, though, Donna. It's reminding me, too, to exercise that right hemisphere, right? That creativity center, because that is our intuition. It does come through there. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I make myself paint, write poetry. I say I make myself because I'm so left-brained. So I actually have to try all the mediums that I can, not just music, but writing, poetry. I drive my roommate crazy with, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going down to Hobby Lobby. I'm picking up some watercolors. Okay.
Get creative today.
Well, it's every day. Every day, Dean. I got to do something every day.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, exercise.
Yeah.
I'm exercising. Yeah.
So on the last chapter, because I know we have 25 minutes left, or no, 20 minutes. Last chapter. What did you guys have anything from the first or the second page?
Page 123, I guess.
Yep, that's right.
I've got clearly the note on last sentence of the first paragraph. Clearly, the notion of objective causality must violate its own logic in order to get started.
Yes. And back to existential. We started.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Objective causality violate its own logic in order to get started. Yeah, that's kind of deep. You have to like a conundrum or something there.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just trying to wrap my head around that, so I underlined it. But yeah, that's it.
So I only had the very last chapter, or the last paragraph highlighted, where he says, the quality of your being expresses the correctness of your understanding. Think about that a moment. What does the quality of your being say about the correctness of your understanding? So maybe we can have that discussion. What does the quality of your being say about the correctness of your understanding?
All right, that's good.
I wrote that. I had that highlighted as well, and I said, "This is deep."
Yes. You now know why I was walking around all week going, "Where am I? Where am I? Where's that belief?"
You're finding your new golf swing.
I'm finding my golf swing.
So how do you interpret that? What are you saying there? What does that mean to you?
Well, again, I think I feel about quality the same way Sylvia feels about feelings. Like without trying to put myself on the continuum of I'm quality now, I wasn't quality then. More of it to me is the evolution, where I guess I would think more about how evolved am I? I guess that's a quality, the quality of my being. How evolved am I? How do I react to things? Kind of some of the things we've already said. How do I, what would, there was a Native American saying about that. What would your enemy say who you are? And talking about when you have you're in a talking circle and you have a talking stick, instead of me right now talking with my talking stick, and say my enemy is down below somewhere, and I hand the stick to them, what would they say about me? Maybe that's the quality of my being. I don't know. That's where I'm stuck with.
Okay. How about you, Sylvia? What does that mean for you?
So again, having just been through this weird, physical, strange experience packet, it jumps to a lot of what I was experiencing there, and actually some of the things that Tom and Pam were saying to me during that process. And that was, Tommy at some stage, I think, said something like, "Yeah, I don't think you're done yet. I think you've got another drama coming because, you probably still need to test that whatever you've learned is actually embedded rather still in your intellect." And so, how you're responding to each of these mini dramas is giving you opportunities to practice responding in a certain way. And that's the way I think about the quality of your being, is expressing the correctness of your understanding. And then, as I had another drama and I sort of was like, okay, I'm going to live in acceptance and I'm going to sleep well and I'm just going to wait and see what they say in the morning, or whatever it was that, I had to actually feel it and be it rather than force myself to think it. And once I was able to actually do it, then that expressed a, step towards correctness or whatever. And the other way, because I actually think things in very human terms. I'm really more interested, almost less in conversing with the LCS, so I feel like I'm supposed to be doing that, need to do that. But, you know, so if I get annoyed with someone, annoyance is a big, for me, a warning flag. I can get angry with someone and be in wisdom. It's really hard for me to feel annoyed and be in wisdom. So if I'm annoyed with someone, I'm like, okay, there's something that's not correct about the quality of my being in this moment. Like, what am I, why? Is it fear? Is it ego? But it's something else is driving my annoyance. So I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody else, but it's how I'm expressing myself that is giving me clues as to whether I'm, you know, hitting that next step that I want to get to.
That makes sense to me. That rings true. If you have a lack of understanding over any given situation, perhaps that you might look at the quality of your being, and maybe there's something that you can do to increase that quality, whatever you want to call quality. You know, I think that's dependent on you. You ultimately are the judge of your own quality, at least the most relevant one in this reality as you move through it.
Yeah. How about for you,
I could
Susan?
go somewhere else if I wanted to.
What is that? How do you take that information? What does it mean
You
to
should
you?
be in your kitchen eating.
So this is, I mean, for me, it's one of those sort of looking at the quality of my consciousness is one of those areas that I think a lot of times I have these beliefs about. There's sometimes I like, oh, I've evolved some, I'm much better, and then something mundane will happen, and I really have to look at myself. Lately, we've been playing chess in the house, and that's, most of us haven't played that for some time. So there's my grandkids are learning, and I'm remembering, and we're playing games, and I feel myself getting really competitive. Like, I have to win, even as I'm telling them, oh, don't worry, it's just a game, because I'm almost always winning. Well, when I don't win, it's like, there's this feeling of I didn't win, and this competitiveness. And then I have to remember these words that it's just a game, and what does it matter? But it's sometimes these very mundane activities that really helps me to remind me that, I've still got a lot of ego going on over things that when you look at them, just aren't that important. It really doesn't matter who wins the chess game, but that ego, I feel that ego rising up, and no, it somehow, I don't know what it says. Like, I think I feel I have to be smarter or better, but it's some of these really small activities that help you to realize that, the quality of your consciousness could use some improving. So, and that's where, for me, I know there's this big blind spot on myself until, a little awareness comes in. But I don't know. It's like maybe 2 steps forward or a step and a half forward, and, a step back. I don't know.
Well, Susan, I'd have to say the quality of your being is probably a couple steps ahead of what you might think, because at least you're aware of it, and your understanding is like, oh, I understand that my ego is kicking in, and I'm feeling like I need to be the winner or whatever. So you're aware of that, and you're kind of looking at the quality of your being like, oh, maybe I should improve. So that's quality in itself, perhaps.
Is that going to be the fear of failure, even though you know that you're aware that it's just a game, everyone's there just to have fun, but the fear of failure kicking in says, well, no, I got to win this game regardless of what my awareness level.
Yeah, I think it speaks to, there's this belief that I have that I'm fairly intelligent, and so somehow losing at a game that requires a lot of strategy and thinking somehow maybe ties back to, well, maybe I'm really not as smart as I think I am. And I don't know, that whole feeling of you got to win to prove something. Well, what am I proving if I win? but I feel it if I lose. So it's just, sometimes for me that it's not the big things that happen. It's really the small everyday things that happen that make me go, wow, wait a minute, what's going on here? So, but I appreciate the comment about maybe I am a little more advanced just because I'm even stopping to think about this. There was a time when that would have never occurred to me, that it was just, well, I just have to win. That's just how it is. And I wouldn't have stopped to think about why and why it's that important, and feeling that there was definitely some ego involved. So
There you go.
so maybe there's some improvement on, like, wait a minute, ego's coming in, and what's at the root of it.
It all comes from a fear. It all traces back to a fear. Anything that's scratchy or negative, based on, and Tom would agree, I think maybe I picked that up from Tom, but it all comes back down to fear at some point, right? We just have to figure out where that schism is, or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's really, what Vanessa talked about, the fear of inadequacy on some level, when you're just not good enough at something that you either want to or think you should be good at. It's a fear of inadequacy, and maybe a feeling of, I'm just not good enough.
Just not good enough, damn it. Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel, what does that mean for you?
I equated being as living, and when I read that, I thought, how am I living my life? Am I living it through other people's influences, or am I truly in control of my life? Am I doing what I, through my heart, what I really want to do? Right. And I know for a good portion of my life, up until the age of 40, it was, living my dad's dreams. He was dictating, even though he wasn't aware of it, I was sort of being dictated by him as to how to live my life. And then once I realized that, it's like, I don't have to listen to him. And then I kind of sort of told him, and then he goes, and then he realized that, because he thought that was the best thing to do, right? Coming from an Asian culture. I'm sure, I don't know of other cultures like that, but then when he realized that, he said, yeah, it's your life. I want you to be happy. I want you to live the life that you wanted to live. And that was coming from an Asian dad. And that's almost unheard of, right? But I made him realize how I want to live my life, and life has changed for me. So that's why I interpret it in terms of being is how are you living your life? How's are you living in the way you're controlling, or is someone in controlling you in terms of how you're living it? So the quality of your life is basic. The quality of your life is, for me, is how I want to live the way I want it to live.
Nice. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's nice.
And Dean, I know that you commented on some. You want to elaborate more on what that material means to you? What that last paragraph means to you?
For the quality of our beings reflected in our understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like what I was saying earlier, when I was talking about Susan's perception of where she felt she was at in the quality of her being, is just perhaps that the quality of my being reflected in my understanding. If I don't understand something, if I'm grappling with wrapping my head around a problem or something that bothers me, that perhaps I need to look at the quality of my being, and if it was increased, whatever that may be, whatever increased or quality is, that I would have a better understanding of what that issue or problem is. And so I can take that, which is good. I like the phrase. I can take that and use it as a measuring stick, perhaps, to see where I might need improvement, and try to figure out, wherever that improvement is. That's a whole different thing, but yeah, it's a good measuring stick, I guess. yes.
Yeah, measuring stick, exactly. I like that. I like how it's, one phrase and there's all these different variations of how we see it and how we say it. For me, it really just, to me, it means that if the quality of my being is one that is kind, caring, making it about others, and compassionate, loving, if it is all these things, then that correlates to I have a really good understanding of the big picture. If, on the other hand, I'm greedy, I'm ego, I'm all about me and myself and I fight all the time, I'm angry, then I really don't get it. I don't quite get why I'm here, and I'm struggling my way through life. Yeah, so that's what it means to me. I don't know, Pamela, did you want to comment? Or?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that kind of behavior will tell you that you're struggling with something. As far as your overall quality of your being, obviously it tells you you're not as highly spiritually evolved as you'd like to be when you're struggling with something, but you're still maybe more spiritually involved than you were a couple of months ago, because you're going to continue to struggle as you reach other lessons and tackle other fears. So it's okay just as long as you're aware of it and you just say, oh, wait a minute, and you don't lash out when you're feeling that way because you feel like, okay, this is me. I need to step back and figure out what I'm working on here and what to do. And it's not really all that my life really is perfect, except for all those horrible people in my environment who keep messing things up.
Right.
So, yeah, just be aware of that and just work on it.
Yeah, I like that. Well, guys, we have 4 minutes left, so maybe we can wrap this up with a closing circle and just share any final thoughts, feelings, insights that we want to share with the group. Do you want to just go counterclockwise again? So it goes Donna, Daniel, Suzanne, Dean, Sylvia, and Pamela on my screen. I don't know how it looks. But Donna, you want to start?
I think we should go in alphabetical order.
First name or last name?
Yeah.
First name. Dan. I'm putting my thoughts together.
Compiling.
So if I could wait, I'm going to pass.
Okay,
sure. I'll go first. Mine's just simple. I just felt like there were a lot of concepts here where listening to everybody express it their way was super helpful to me. So I'll just throw that out there. The whole point of this is so underscored by hearing other people's response to even just the phrasing that we each use. It just adds so much nuance to my understanding, and I found it really helpful. So thank you all.
I will say the same thing. It's having them share their perspective of the 2 chapters that we went through. It sort of enhances my perspective of how I see things. It creates a larger awareness of all that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's me then. Nothing particular other than thanks, guys. It's been a real pleasure, and appreciate being with you. I enjoyed listening to everybody, and it's all good material to kind of mull over as my day goes on and inspire some big thinking or some good thoughts or places that I can look at to improve myself. Yeah, it's been fun. I look forward to seeing you guys again.
Awesome.
Is it me? Okay.
Sure.
So even though we are all on these, we're all walking our own path or our own journey, it is helpful to have these conversations with other people to sometimes point out maybe what is better or maybe not good, quite, maybe something that needs more work for you. But I do always try to remember why I do what I do, and is that intent an ego-based intent, or is it really from a higher place? And sometimes it is very ego-driven, and so just being aware of that and hoping to one day get to the point where it's not driven by ego. But one of the earlier conversations that we had around need, I will tell you, moving really, I moved over the summer, and moving really makes you evaluate need. Like, do I really need everything that's in every box that I moved? Because we moved a lot of stuff. And originally I'd felt that I got rid of a lot of stuff because we didn't need it. But I don't know. My definition of need is apparently very big, because there was a lot of stuff that got moved because we needed it. And so I'm really sort of mulling over, what do I need? Physically and in other ways, because so I'm sort of stuck on need. But I do appreciate these sessions, and it gives me more to think about. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Donna?
Yes, I think of what it was like without these meetings and what it's like with the meetings, and it's what everybody said. I like I like that we go on the book and then we go off the books, because I feel like it's a left brain, right brain thing. So even in our book club, we're doing that. I like that. I like you people. I like people. I like you. You're my tribe. I feel very connected to you after Tennessee. I never thought I'd be this kind of connected with folks, and I like it. I appreciate it. And I like how you started with setting the space and ending the space.
Okay, that's great feedback. Awesome. Thank you, Donna. Pamela?
Okay, just got off mute. Well, I just want to say that it was really nice to see everybody again today, since I missed you recently. And I do enjoy this because it gives me an opportunity, like you say, to be with like-minded people, and you spur me to think about things that I haven't thought about before. So thank you.
Thank you.
Pamela.
Yeah, I love having you join us for this. I just absolutely love you guys. This is incredible. I always look forward to this. This is something that I really cherish. So I'm super thankful to be a part of this. And I'm excited for this week coming up, because the whole week we'll be looking at this chapter. If you've already read it, we can look more deeply at it. So chapter 19, Belief Trap. And then next week we'll discuss it same time. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.